We have 5 minutes to begin. So hi, Dr. Riazi, would you mind please turn on your webcam so we can test whether it works or not? Yeah.
Yeah, good evening.
Good afternoon.
Do you have my voice?
Yeah, it's crystal clear. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. Yeah.
Here it is 6:57. So we have 3 or 4 minutes to begin.
Yeah.
27.
You have such a big library behind you.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is the only asset that I myself have.
That tells a lot.
Thank you so much for accepting my invitation and
My pleasure.
yeah, for arranging this talk. I know that you're very busy these days, so it's an honor for us to have you here in this talk.
Thank you.
Yeah. Let's wait a little bit.
Yeah.
2 or 3 minutes.
Sure. Is it raining in Tehran or?
No, we are expecting it after next Sunday.
Next Sunday.
Yeah,
okay. I think
yeah.
Overall this year there has been better precipitation than previous years.
Yeah, but we need to see what will happen and continue because we are expecting heavier snow next week, yeah, and the weeks after that.
Okay. It's good. Snow is good because it lasts for a while. And so hopefully that continues to the warm days when there is still some need for water. And as the snow dissolves, there should be some streams.
Mm-hmm. Peter also asked me at 6 that whether it is at 6 or 7. I told him that we will start at 7. So he said that he would participate.
That's great. And he should know that it's 7 Iran time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know whether we have Peter DeCosta or not here. If let me check.
It's good there because if he attends, I have some quotes from some of his articles, so it would be great to have him.
But no, I can send him a text in WhatsApp so whether check we have it or not. Good. Shall we start or?
Whenever you would like to start, I'm ready to go.
We have 43 participants. So let's start with your biography, and after that we can have the talk. Thanks again, Dr. Riazi, for accepting my invitation in order to present about this important topic here in L2 research. Despite the fact that everyone knows you, I want to give a short biography of you. Dr. Mehdi Riazi obtained his PhD in applied linguistics from the University of Toronto. He has supervised 50 master's and 22 doctoral theses to completion. He has been the chief investigator for 3 research projects on test validation funded by IELTS, Pearson, and Educational Testing Service. He's the author of Routledge Encyclopedia of Research Methods, Routledge 2016, and Mixed Methods Research, and more. His academic works have been cited more than 4,500 times by other researchers. He has an H-index of 33, an H-index of 36, according to Google Scholar. Thank you so much, Dr. Riazi, again. Trustworthiness is a very important issue here in L2 research generally, and in qualitative research specifically, because the question of validity, the issue of validity, and the techniques that qualitative researchers have at hand in order to guarantee it is very, very problematic nowadays, despite the fact that we have several techniques and issues for validation in quantitative research. In qualitative research, we have the paucity of studies and review papers to check whether, to what extent our conducted studies, our conducted qualitative studies are valid or not. Here, Dr. Riazi give us a lot of information about trustworthiness and how L2 researchers generally and qualitative researchers specifically can guarantee trustworthiness of their qualitative studies. Thank you so much, Dr. Riazi. The stage is yours, and we'll listen to your talk. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Khambar, for arranging this session. It's my pleasure to attend this session and share my understanding of trustworthiness in qualitative research with my colleagues, students, and who are attending this session. Since the main audience are from Iran, so I would like to greet them in Persian. Salam میکنم خدمت تک تک همه عزیزان و امیدوار هستم که جلسه امروز جلسه خوبی باشه. Thank you for your introduction, and I hope over the next 60 or so minutes I will be able to discuss trustworthiness in qualitative research. I just want to check with you whether this session is being recorded.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your reminder. Yeah, I forgot to do so.
Yeah, because some people actually have asked me if they will have an access to the.
It's now being recorded. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Okay, my pleasure. Okay, all right. As we all know, actually, one challenge that we are facing in conducting qualitative research is to make it credible and trustworthy. And this is a real challenge, especially for early career and postgraduate qualitative researchers. This is not so much a challenge in quantitative research. I'm not saying that quantitative researchers do not have, a challenge of making their research valid, but I would say that their challenge is not as serious as it is in qualitative research. The reason, as we will find out, is that as we all know, in quantitative research, we are dealing with numbers. And therefore, as soon as we are able to provide some numerical indices regarding the reliability and validity of our instruments, as well as our findings, we are there. And so it's credible in a sense. Whereas in qualitative research, it's all based on words, interpretation, language. And so to some extent, it's subjective, and therefore, making qualitative research valid and trustworthy turns out to be a challenge, and it might not be as easy as and as streamlined as it might be in quantitative research. So based on a challenge, today I'm going to answer 5 questions. And I hope by answering and discussing these 5 questions, we get an understanding of what trustworthiness is and how we can address it in our research if we aim at planning and conducting a qualitative research. So the first question I'm going to discuss is why doing research? Why in the world should we carry out research in the first place, and how we can make our research valid and credible? The second question is what are different research approaches to knowledge production if the ultimate goal of doing research is to produce knowledge and make it available to different stakeholders and people and society at large. So how can we do that? And then I will focus on trustworthiness in research. And the next question would be, what are the criteria for the truthfulness or trustworthiness in qualitative research? Because these terms are synonymous. So when we talk about validity, trustworthiness, truthfulness, in a sense, they are the same thing. And we would like to say that what we have come across as propositional knowledge is meaningful. And the last and fifth question would be how to ensure that trustworthiness in qualitative research and how we can report it, because it's very important to consider trustworthiness not only in the process of research, but also in the product, the final report that we submit to the journals or to the organizations or funding institutions or whatever, wherever. And also, it's very important to find out the relationship between trustworthiness and ethics, because as we'll see, and one of the main concerns in any type of research is ethics, and we will find out how these two actually might be related to each other. Hopefully, there would be some time at the end for you to provide comments, and also if there are any questions, I would be more than happy to address those questions. So let's move on with the first question. Why doing research? Okay, the immediate answer actually, and as we understand it, and it's one of our purposes, is especially for academics and faculty members. We are all familiar with this aphorism: publish or perish. And so if we are going to maintain our jobs at the universities, we need to show that we are research active. And therefore, in some universities, there are even specific criteria that you need to publish 2 articles per year. So one of the criteria for assessing research activity is that you need to have 2 papers published each year in peer-reviewed journals, for example. I know that in some universities, actually, this is a requirement. Also, we understand that in some doctoral programs, students are required to publish 1 or 2 papers before they can have their revival. And more broadly, for promotion, we understand that research is one of the 3 main categories in the promotion policy, and therefore we need to show that we are research active, and therefore we have carried out relevant research, and we are able to provide relevant evidence for that. Apart from this instrumental, if I call it instrumental type of motivation for doing research, there should be a more genuine aspiration and purpose in doing research, and that is, as I mentioned, producing knowledge. How this knowledge is produced, usually as researchers, we start with a question or a challenge, an issue that we would like to find an answer to. And the way that we do it is that we collect data, relevant data, appropriate data that are related to that question or challenge. And then we try to change this data, which we usually refer to as raw data. And we understand what this raw data is. In quantitative research, this raw data might be collected through tests, for example. They could be collected through questionnaires. They could be collected through some instruments in some other disciplines. For example, in chemistry, they collect data in laboratories, through microscopes, for example, any other instruments that might help researchers to collect that data. Recently, we are familiar with eye tracking, for example, in many areas in applied linguistics, that it is possible to track eye movements as participants perform on a task, and they are able to provide big data in a sense. And then we need to, whatever data we collect, but the requirement is that it needs to be relevant. We need to change this data, raw data, into information. How do we do that? By analyzing data, by processing data into information. And there are certain techniques, methods that we can use in order to change data into information. So, for example, when we have quantitative data, we use appropriate quantitative data analysis, a statistical analysis, for example. And nowadays, there are more sophisticated ways of analyzing quantitative data. If they are qualitative data gathered through interviews, for example, texts, corpora, for example, then again, there are relevant and appropriate methods of analysis that we need to use, and therefore change the data into information. The difference between data and information, therefore, is that data is raw. It doesn't tell us anything. It doesn't convey any story about the question that we have and the problem and the phenomenon that we are investigating and addressing. But as soon as we process the raw data and make it into information, then we get some information. To give you an example, if I administer a test to 100 students and I get 100 scores, the 100 scores do not tell me anything. I'm not able actually to make any inference out of that. As soon as I analyze the data and I find the means, the minimum, the maximum, the standard deviation through a statistical analysis, then I am in a position to say that, for example, the average performance for these 100 students is this, and compared to previous or other cohorts, what does it mean? What does it mean? And this is usually what is commonly done in many disciplines, in psychology, in sociology, in agriculture, and in other disciplines, including our own discipline, which is applied linguistics. So one good example is the IQ test, the intelligence test, that when a test is administered to a sample from a population, and then once it is analyzed based on the mean and standard deviation, there is the possibility of making inferences about particular cohorts and compare them with other cohorts. So this is just to give you an idea of what it means to process data into information. This is exactly the same for qualitative data. When we collect, for example, interviews, or when we have texts and we want to change them into information, we need to analyze them. And usually the analysis of qualitative data is done through what is called thematic analysis. So in the thematic analysis, we try to extract themes from the data so that we are able to talk about the sample that we are working with. And once we have the information, then we need to change it into knowledge. We usually need to do two things in order to change information into knowledge. The first one is interpretation of the information. So as researchers who are close to the topic and the data and the context, we are in a very good position to interpret. For example, what does the mean of 17 of a particular class or a school mean? So it is expected from researchers to be able to interpret, the information. Also, when we come across, for example, one or two themes from our data, then we as researchers need to interpret it and say what it means, because we are close to the topic, to the context, and to the participants. On the other hand, the other aspect of changing information into knowledge is to discuss it in light of other research, and this is one of the reasons that usually we do literature review. So one of the purposes of literature review is to provide a context for our research and say what other researchers actually have done, albeit it might be on different aspects of the topic. But at the discussion level of our information, we would be in a good position to compare and contrast our findings with those of other researchers, and therefore changing it into knowledge. In other words, the specific information that we get from our research project, we try to expand it in light of other studies, and therefore changing it into knowledge. Now, the interesting thing is that in research, although knowledge is the target of research and we would like to produce some sort of knowledge, but still there is another important level in research, and that is to use that knowledge as wisdom. In a sense that knowledge for the sake of knowledge, of course, might be useful because we might be able to expand the border of knowledge. We might be expand, the frontiers of knowledge in any discipline. That's good, and all the time. The researchers in physics, in chemistry, in geography, in applied linguistics, and psychology, by doing and carrying out research, and specifically because, as we said, they discuss it in light of previous, studies. They try to expand frontiers of knowledge and therefore enhance our understanding of ourselves and the world that we are living in. On the other hand, one of the aspects of producing knowledge is to use it as wisdom in our profession and practice. And this is why that people talk about best practice. So best practice actually is known as the type of wisdom that practitioners develop in any discipline based on the research and knowledge that they acquire through everyday studies. And this has helped us a lot in medicine, in engineering, in psychology, in sociology, in economics. So the more systematic and trustworthy research and valid research is carried out, the more knowledge we are able to produce and the more wise we will be. Because the way that we do in our professions highly depend on the findings of our research. And I have put practical in parentheses because some people actually use this as practical. And if you are familiar with he has a word that has been translated into English as practical wisdom, and that's phronesis. So phronesis, as explained by Aristotle, is that not only we need knowledge to do better in our professions, but also we need to do it ethically. And this is where actually ethics, come in. So imagine, for example, that a surgeon has, the knowledge of what and knowledge of how, which is usually referred to as episteme knowledge and techno knowledge. So episteme knowledge is the theoretical knowledge of the field, and techno knowledge is the knowledge of how. So a person might know knowledge of what and knowledge of how, but more important than that is whether they use it in an ethical way or not. We are now living in a world that we have ample, evidence where the outcome of research and knowledge might not be used in an ethical way. And this is very important for researchers, and this is why practical wisdom is very important. So a surgeon might actually diagnose that a person needs heart operation, open heart operation, but he also needs to make some judgment as whether this is required to be done at this time with this specific person or not. So only the theoretical knowledge, the knowledge of what and the knowledge of how are not enough, but also some levels of ethical knowledge is required, and this is why it is called practical wisdom. Hopefully, by doing research, by producing knowledge, we as human beings become more wise in what we do in our professions and practices. So for us, if we are going to translate, if we are going to teach, if we are going to do any other activities related to language, then it's important to have the knowledge of what, the knowledge of how, but also to use it in an ethical way so that we can talk about practical wisdom. Okay, so now that we understand the process of research and the outcome of the research, the next question is, what are different approaches to knowledge production? These different approaches have been referred to as research paradigms or research approaches and research methodologies. There are, generally speaking, but I don't actually want to limit this to these three, underlying philosophical, paradigms. But generally speaking, there are three paradigms, as you're familiar with. One is positivist paradigm, interpretivist paradigm, and pragmatist paradigm. Positivist paradigm translates into quantitative research, numerical data, and statistical analysis and numerical analysis, as we are familiar with. Interpretivist paradigm translates into qualitative research, which is the focus of my today's seminar, and methodology that basically uses verbal language and words and qualitative data analysis. And pragmatist paradigm or mixed methods research and methodology that mixes both of the two methodologies. For some time, as you know, actually there was a quarrel and even a war between the first two research paradigms. But recently, over the last 20, 30 years, there has been a reconciliation between the two camps. And therefore, now we are at a time that we see a lot of mixed methods that tries to mix both quantitative and qualitative methodologies in order to come across a more comprehensive understanding of research findings. Okay, I have this quote from Aristotle that we are what we repeatedly do, and for those who are interested or they have worked with regard to construct, this is also a definition for construct. A construct is something that is repeated and therefore can be conceived as a concept and used as a concept. So Aristotle said that we are what we repeatedly do, and excellence then is not an act. So similar to construct, something that happens only once cannot be considered as a construct.